The wooden box in Juanita Vanoy's hands silenced the courtroom. As Michael Jordan's eyes locked onto it, the basketball legend's face drained of color. For the first time in his life, the man who had faced down the greatest players in NBA history looked genuinely afraid. The Chicago courthouse buzzed with whispers like angry bees. Everyone knew Michael Jordan would be there today. The famous basketball player who won 6 championships with the Chicago Bulls rarely showed up in public places anymore, especially not courtrooms. Reporters packed the wooden benches, notebooks ready. Security guards stood tall at every door. The judge wasn't even in the room yet, but you could feel something big was about to happen. Michael sat at the front table beside his lawyers. He wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than what most people earned in a month. His face looked older now than when he played basketball, but his eyes still had that fierce look that scared players who tried to guard him on the court. "All rise!" the bailiff called out. Everyone stood as Judge Patricia Wilson entered. Her black robe swished as she took her seat. "You may be seated," she said, her voice firm. "We're here today regarding case number 482B, Jordan versus Collectors Association of American Sports." The case was about some old Chicago Bulls items found during stadium renovations. Who owned them? Michael or the collectors who bought rights to team merchandise? Millions of dollars were at stake. "Let's begin with opening statements, Judge," Wilson said. Michael's lawyer stood up, straightening his tie. "Your Honor, my client—" The heavy wooden doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a loud creak. Every head turned. The room fell so quiet, you could hear the old ceiling fan spinning above. A woman stood in the doorway, her figure outlined by the bright hallway light behind her. She was tall and elegant in a simple blue dress. Her hair was styled short, framing a face that had aged gracefully. She carried something small in her hands, a wooden box about the size of a basketball. Juanita Vanoy, Michael Jordan's ex-wife. Michael's head snapped around. His eyes widened, and for a moment, the great Michael Jordan, the man they called Air, looked like someone had knocked all the air out of him. His lawyer leaned over, whispering urgently. Michael didn't respond. He just stared at Juanita. "I apologize for interrupting, Your Honor," Juanita said softly as she walked down the center aisle. Judge Wilson frowned. "Ms. Vanoy, this is unexpected. Are you represented by counsel today?" "No, Your Honor. I'm here on my own, but it relates directly to this case." Juanita's voice was calm, confident. "I have something the court needs to see." The wooden box in her hands suddenly became the most interesting thing in the room. What could Michael Jordan's ex-wife be bringing to court years after their divorce? That would matter now. Michael's lawyer stood up again. "Your Honor, we weren't notified about this. My client's former spouse has no standing in this case. Isbiti tuitem." "That's so." Judge Wilson looked at Juanita. "Ms. Vanoy, please approach the bench and explain why you're here." Juanita walked forward, her heels clicking on the marble floor. As she passed Michael's table, their eyes met for just a second. 27 years of history flashed between them. Their wedding in 1989, their 3 children, their divorce in 2006 after 17 years of marriage. Michael's face had turned an unusual shade of pale. His hands gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles whitened. Juanita spoke quietly to the judge, who nodded several times, looking surprised. She handed the judge a document from her purse. Judge Wilson studied it, then looked at Michael. "Mr. Jordan, were you aware of this?" Michael cleared his throat. "No, Your Honor, He stopped, his eyes fixed on the wooden box. "What is that?" he asked Juanita directly. The courtroom fell silent again. Everyone leaned forward slightly. Juanita didn't answer. She just held the box tighter. "Your Honor," Michael's lawyer jumped in, "we request a short recess." Judge Wilson nodded. "Given this development, we'll take 30 minutes. She banged her gavel. "Court is in recess." The room erupted in noise. Reporters rushed for the doors, eager to file breaking stories about the surprise appearance of Michael Jordan's ex-wife. Michael stood, buttoning his suit jacket. His face had shifted from shock to something harder to read. Maybe fear, maybe anger. He whispered something to his lawyer, who nodded rapidly. Juanita remained where she was, still holding the wooden box. She hadn't come here to create a scene. She'd come because of a promise made long ago, one that even divorce couldn't break. As security guided Michael to a private room, he looked back once at Juanita. Their eyes locked again, and this time, something passed between them that made Michael's stern expression soften just slightly. Whatever was in that box, it clearly meant something serious to both of them. The bailiff approached Juanita. "Ms. Vanoy, the judge would like you to wait in her chambers." Juanita nodded and followed him, still carrying the wooden box as if it contained something more precious than gold. The reporters who remained in the courtroom watched her go, their minds racing with questions. What could Michael Jordan's ex-wife be bringing to court that would make the basketball legend look so shaken? What secrets were hidden in that simple wooden box, and why, after all these years, was Juanita Vanoy stepping back into Michael Jordan's very public life? The answers would have to wait 30 minutes, but one thing was certain. This day that had started as a simple property dispute had just turned into something much more personal, much more dramatic. For Michael Jordan, a man used to controlling every situation, the surprise appearance of his ex-wife with a mysterious box had clearly caught him off guard. And Michael Jordan did not like to be caught off guard. The day that was supposed to be about old basketball memorabilia had suddenly become about something much deeper, something from the past that was about to change everything. The 30-minute recess stretched to 45 as lawyers huddled in corners, whispering urgently. When Judge Wilson finally returned, the courtroom settled quickly. "Before we continue," the judge announced, "I've reviewed the documents Ms. Vanoy provided. They appear legitimate and relevant to these proceedings." Michael Jordan sat straighter in his chair, his face now composed into the same mask of determination that basketball fans had seen countless times before big games. Whatever shock Juanita's appearance had caused, he had pushed it down deep inside. "Mr. Jordan has requested a brief delay to consult with his legal team," Judge Wilson continued. "We'll reconvene tomorrow morning at 9. As people filed out, whispers followed Michael and Juanita. They left through separate doors, the wooden box still in Juanita's possession. That night, as rain tapped against his hotel window, Michael Jordan stood looking out at the Chicago skyline. This city had made him a legend. But before the fame and fortune, before the championships and the Nike deals, before meeting Juanita, there had been a skinny kid from North Carolina with big dreams. Wilmington, North Carolina, 1974. "Michael, come help your father with these groceries." Dolores Jordan called from the front porch. 12-year-old Michael ran from the backyard, where he'd been trying to perfect a reverse layup using the hoop his father had installed. "Yes, ma'am," he answered, wiping sweat from his forehead. James Jordan, Michael's father, smiled as his son grabbed 2 heavy bags from the car. "You been practicing all morning?" "Yes, sir," Michael said. "I'm getting better." James ruffled his son's short hair. "It's not about getting better, son. It's about working harder than anybody else." That night at dinner, Michael's older brother Larry teased him about basketball. "You'll never be taller than me," Larry said, reaching for another piece of fried chicken. At 16, Larry stood 5 inches taller than Michael. "Maybe not," Michael replied, "but I'll be better." His mother raised an eyebrow. "That's enough competition at the dinner table." James winked at Michael. "Nothing wrong with a little fire in the belly." Those early lessons stuck with Michael through the years that followed. When he got cut from the varsity basketball team as a sophomore at Laney High School, he didn't quit. The pain of walking to the gym and not seeing his name on that list burned into his memory. "I cried when I got home," Michael told his father that day. James nodded, understanding. "Good, let it out. Then tomorrow, you work twice as hard." And he did. Michael woke up at 6 a.m. every morning to practice before school. He stayed late after practice, shooting baskets until the janitor kicked him out. His mother worried he was pushing too hard, but James saw something special in his son's determination. "He's got a gift," James told Dolores one night after Michael had fallen asleep, exhausted from training. "But it's his heart that'll make him great." By junior year, Michael grew taller and made varsity. By senior year, college scouts noticed the lanky guard with the amazing jumping ability. When the University of North Carolina offered him a basketball scholarship, his parents couldn't have been prouder. "You earned this," James said, holding the scholarship letter. "Every early morning, every extra hour of practice, this is what it was for." Michael nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad." James shook his head. "No, son. You did this. Nobody can want greatness for you. You have to want it for yourself." At North Carolina, Michael's star rose quickly. Coach Dean Smith helped shape his raw talent into disciplined excellence. In his freshman year, Michael hit the game-winning shot in the 1982 NCAA championship game against Georgetown. As the ball swished through the net with just seconds left on the clock, Michael pumped his fist in the air. That moment changed everything. Suddenly, he wasn't just good, he was clutch, a player who delivered when it mattered most. The Chicago Bulls drafted him 3rd overall in 1984. Some critics wondered if the guard from North Carolina was worth such a high pick. "They'll see," Michael told his father over the phone after draft day. James laughed. "Make them eat those words, son." And he did. His rookie season, Michael averaged 28.2 points per game, started in the All-Star game, and was named Rookie of the Year. Chicago fell in love with the young man whose aerial acrobatics earned him the nickname Air Jordan. Nike signed him to a shoe deal that would change sports marketing forever. In 1985, during his second season with the Bulls, Michael walked into a Chicago restaurant after a game. That's when he first saw her, Juanita Vanoy, a loan officer at a local bank. "Who is that?" Michael asked his friend who had invited him to dinner. "That's Juanita. Want me to introduce you?" Michael nodded, suddenly nervous in a way that facing NBA defenders never made him feel. Juanita was beautiful, but what caught Michael's attention was her confidence. She wasn't star-struck meeting him. She asked questions about North Carolina, about his family, not about basketball. "You don't seem impressed by all this," Michael said, gesturing vaguely to the people watching them from other tables. Juanita smiled. "Should I be? It's just dinner." Michael laughed, genuinely delighted. In a world that increasingly treated him like something more than human, Juanita saw the man beneath the growing legend. As Michael's fame grew, their relationship deepened. Juanita became his anchor in a world spinning faster every day. The wooden box that now sat in a hotel room across town, the same box that had caused such a stir in the courtroom, had its beginnings in those early days, before championships, before marriage, before their worlds grew complicated. Back then, it was just Michael and Juanita, and the simple promise of tomorrow. Chicago, 1988, the Bulls team bus rolled through the city streets after another loss. Michael sat alone in the back, replaying every missed shot in his mind. 3 seasons in the NBA, and the team still couldn't get past the first round of playoffs. "You can't win by yourself," head coach Doug Collins had told him after the game. Michael knew this was true, but it didn't ease his frustration. He averaged nearly 35 points per game, yet the Bulls remained mediocre. While teammates headed to clubs to forget the loss, Michael asked the driver to drop him at a small restaurant where Juanita waited. Their relationship had grown serious over the past 2 years. "Tough game," she said, as he slid into the booth across from her. Michael nodded, his eyes tired. "I'm giving everything I have." Juanita reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I know. That's who you are." Later that night, as they walked along Lake Michigan, Michael stopped suddenly. "I've been thinking about something." Juanita looked up at him, her breath visible in the cold night air. "I want you to have this," Michael said, pulling a small wooden box from his coat pocket. It was handmade, polished walnut with a tiny silver basketball inlaid on the lid. "What is it?" Juanita asked, taking the box carefully. "Open it when you get home," Michael said. "It's something I want to share only with you. Not the world, not the press, just you." Juanita nodded, understanding the weight of his words. In a life increasingly lived in public, private moments had become rare and precious. The 1988-89 season brought change. New teammates like Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant developed alongside Michael. The Bulls improved, reaching the Eastern Conference Finals before losing to the Detroit Pistons. Off the court, Michael's star power exploded. The Air Jordan shoes became a cultural phenomenon. His Nike commercial with filmmaker Spike Lee made "It's gotta be the shoes" a nationwide catchphrase. Children everywhere stuck out their tongues when shooting baskets, copying Michael's signature move. Through it all, Juanita remained his steady center. In September 1989, they married in a small Las Vegas ceremony. Seeking privacy from the media circus, their wedding would have become in Chicago. "I promised to remember who we were before all this," Michael said in his vows, gesturing to the simple wedding chapel that stood in stark contrast to his growing wealth. Their first son, Jeffrey, was born in 1988. Their second son, Marcus, arrived in 1990. Michael's career and family were growing together. The wooden box sat on Juanita's dresser at home. Occasionally, she would open it and read what Michael had written inside. It contained his deepest hopes and fears, things the public Michael Jordan would never say, but the private man needed to express. In 1991, everything changed again. Under new coach Phil Jackson, the Bulls finally defeated their nemesis, the Detroit Pistons, and advanced to the NBA Finals against the Los Angeles Lakers. The night before Game 1, Michael couldn't sleep. "What if we come this far and I can't finish it?" he asked Juanita as they talked on the phone from his hotel room. "Then you'll try again," she said simply. "But that's not who you are. You finish what you start." Michael smiled into the phone. "That's why I need you." The Bulls won the series in 5 games. When the final buzzer sounded, Michael clutched the basketball and fell to his knees, overcome with emotion. In the locker room celebration, he called Juanita first, before any interviews. "We did it," he said, his voice breaking. "You did it," she corrected him. "Now, come home and be dad for a while." That first championship opened the floodgates. The Bulls won again in 1992 and 1993, establishing a dynasty with Michael as its unquestioned king. He led the Dream Team to Olympic gold in 1992, spreading basketball's popularity globally. Fame changed him in subtle ways. The demands on his time grew exponentially. Endorsement deals, interviews, appearances. Everyone wanted a piece of Michael Jordan. Juanita noticed the shift. The man who came home was increasingly exhausted, sometimes distant. Their third child, daughter Jasmine, was born in 1992, bringing joy but also highlighting how much of family life Michael missed during the season. "Sometimes I wonder if you remember that wooden box," Juanita said one night after Michael returned from a road trip. He looked at her sharply. "Of course I do. Why?" "Because what you wrote in there feels very far away from who we're becoming." Michael wanted to argue but couldn't. Success had brought security for his family, but taken something else away. The simple connection they once had. "I remember everything in that box," he said quietly. "I just don't know how to live it anymore." Before they could find a solution, tragedy struck. In July 1993, Michael's father James was murdered in North Carolina, shot while sleeping in his car at a highway rest stop. 2 teenagers were later convicted of the crime. The loss devastated Michael. James had been more than a father. He was Michael's closest friend and most trusted advisor. That October, just before the 1993-94 season, Michael shocked the world by announcing his retirement from basketball at age 30. "I have lost my desire to play the game," he told the packed press conference. "My father always said that when you lose that desire, it's time to move on." What he didn't say publicly was that basketball had become empty without James there to share it. The last connection to the boy from North Carolina who played for love of the game seemed severed. As cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, Michael reached for Juanita's hand under the table. For the first time in years, they truly needed each other again. The wooden box and its contents would become even more significant in the difficult days ahead, as the world's greatest basketball player tried to find a new path forward. In 2020, months after his retirement, Michael sought new challenges. He shocked the sports world again by signing a minor league baseball contract with the Chicago White Sox, pursuing his father's dream for him. "My dad always wanted me to play baseball," Michael told reporters at spring training in Florida. "This CTO is for him." Cameras followed his every move as he struggled to hit curveballs in the Southern League. Critics mocked the experiment, but Michael persisted through long bus rides and empty stadiums, a humbling experience for someone who had played only in sold-out arenas. At home, Michael and Juanita's relationship found new ground. For the first time since they'd met, he was consistently present. He coached Jeffrey's youth basketball team, built a treehouse with Marcus, and rocked baby Jasmine to sleep. One evening, as they sat on their patio watching the sunset, Juanita brought out the wooden box. "Remember this?" she asked. Michael nodded, taking it carefully. "I haven't opened it since I gave it to you." "Maybe you should," she said softly. Inside was a handwritten letter and a folded piece of paper. The letter contained Michael's deepest thoughts from his early NBA days. Hopes for a career where winning wouldn't change who he was. Fears about losing touch with his roots. Promises to put family first, despite fame's pull. The second item was a list titled "What Matters Most," written in Michael's neat handwriting. At the top, family, faith, the joy of the game, his father's approval. Michael read silently, then closed the box. "I wrote this before I understood what fame really meant." "Do you still believe these things?" Juanita asked. "I want to," he answered honestly. That conversation led to a renewal of their marriage. They recommitted to the values in that box, away from cameras and public expectations. But basketball wasn't finished with Michael Jordan. In March 1995, with the baseball players' strike still ongoing and his baseball progress stalled, Michael sent a two-word fax to the media. "I'm back." His return to the Bulls electrified Chicago. His first game back sold out in minutes. Though the Bulls lost in the playoffs that year to the Orlando Magic, everyone knew something special was brewing. The 1995-96 season became the stuff of legend. The Bulls won 72 games, breaking the NBA record. Michael claimed his fourth MVP award. The team steamrolled through the playoffs and defeated the Seattle Supersonics for the championship. As Michael held the trophy aloft, cameras caught Juanita and their children beaming from the stands. The golden years had arrived. Two more championships followed in 1997 and 1998, completing what became known as the second three-peat. Michael's fame reached unprecedented heights. He starred in the movie Space Jam, expanding his cultural footprint beyond sports. Fortune magazine estimated he added $10 billion to the U.S. economy through his endorsements and influence. But the wooden box and its contents seemed increasingly distant from their lives. The Jordan family moved into a 56,000-square-foot compound in Highland Park with a full basketball court, putting green and tennis courts. Security guards manned the gates. Privacy became both necessary and isolating. "I miss normal," Juanita confessed one night after they'd attended a gala where people paid $10,000 per plate just to breathe the same air as Michael Jordan. "I'm not sure I remember what normal feels like," Michael admitted. Their home life functioned like a well-run business. Nannies helped with the children. Household staff managed daily operations. Michael's personal assistants coordinated his endless obligations. Juanita maintained the family's emotional core, creating as much stability as possible for the children despite their father's extraordinary circumstances. She kept the wooden box on her dresser, a reminder of simpler times. The night before Game 6 of the 1998 NBA Finals against the Utah Jazz, what would become Michael's famous last shot game, he couldn't sleep again. Alone in his Salt Lake City hotel room, he called Juanita. "I think this is it," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" she asked. "My last game with the Bulls. Maybe my last game ever." The conversation that followed lasted nearly 2 hours. Michael spoke about Phil Jackson leaving, about feeling tired of the spotlight, about wanting to reclaim parts of himself that basketball had consumed. The next morning, he wrote a new letter and faxed it to Juanita. "Add this to the box, though," cover note read, "for when I forget again." Hours later, with 5.2 seconds remaining, and the Bulls down by 1 point, Michael hit the championship-winning shot over Brian Russell. The image became iconic. Michael's extended follow-through posture, his tongue slightly out, the ball swishing through the net. His 6th championship sealed, Michael retired again in January 1999. This time, it seemed permanent. But the golden years of basketball success had taken a toll on their marriage. The balance they'd found during his baseball days had eroded under the weight of constant travel, public scrutiny, and the isolation that extreme fame creates. In January 2002, Juanita filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The wooden box and its contents seemed forgotten in the flurry of legal documents and negotiations that followed. Then, unexpectedly, she withdrew the divorce petition a month later. They would try again, for the children and for themselves. Saui was a brief reprieve. Their reconciliation lasted 4 more years, but some distances had grown too wide to bridge. In December 2006, they announced their divorce, ending 17 years of marriage. The settlement, $168 million, made headlines as one of the largest celebrity divorce payments in history. Through it all, Juanita kept the wooden box, not as leverage or ammunition, but as a reminder of the man she had married before the world claimed him, the young player with dreams bigger than basketball, who once trusted her with his most honest self. The divorce finalized. Michael and Juanita built separate lives. Michael purchased a $12.8 million mansion in Jupiter, Florida, not far from his new business venture, the Charlotte Bobcats basketball team, which he bought in 2006. Juanita stayed in Chicago, focusing on real estate investments and their 3 children. Each year on their former wedding anniversary, Juanita would open the wooden box and read its contents, not to reopen old wounds, but to remember the man she had loved, the man who existed before the myth of Michael Jordan consumed him. Even as their personal relationship ended, they maintained a respectful connection for their children. At Jeffrey and Marcus's college basketball games, they sat separately but exchanged polite nods. At Jasmine's graduation, they posed for family photos, standing with careful space between them. For Michael, the years after basketball brought new challenges. His competitive fire found outlets in business ventures and golf tournaments. In 2011, he surprised many by proposing to his girlfriend of 3 years, Cuban-American model Yvette Prieto. When news of the engagement reached Juanita, she took out the wooden box again. This time, she added something of her own, a letter she never intended to send. In it, she wrote about hopes that Michael would find happiness, about gratitude for their children, about forgiveness for the ways fame had changed them both. Michael and Yvette married in April 2013 in a lavish ceremony with 500 guests, far different from the simple Las Vegas wedding he and Juanita had chosen. In February 2014, Yvette gave birth to identical twin daughters, Victoria and Isabel. Meanwhile, Juanita embraced her role as a grandmother when Jeffrey's first child was born. She developed a successful career in art collecting and real estate, finally finding an identity separate from Michael Jordan's wife. The wooden box remained with her, tucked away in a safe most days. The children knew of its existence, but not its contents. It became a silent keeper of a shared history that grew more distant with each passing year. Until one day in January 2022, when workers renovating the old Chicago Bulls locker room at the United Center made a discovery. While removing the wooden lockers that had housed the legendary 1990s championship teams, a construction worker found something wedged behind the locker that had belonged to Michael Jordan. It was a sealed envelope, yellowed with age, with MJ, read before last game, written on the front in handwriting only a few people would recognize. The Bulls organization, uncertain what to do with this potential piece of sports history, contacted Michael's representatives. His lawyers responded swiftly, claiming anything found in his former locker was private property that belonged to their client. But news of the discovery leaked to collectors. The Collectors Association of American Sports filed a claim, arguing that their agreements with the Bulls gave them rights to all team memorabilia found during renovations. The matter seemed headed for a straightforward legal resolution until Juanita received a phone call from an old friend who still worked with the Bulls organization. "They found something in Michael's locker," the friend said, "and there's writing on it that looks a lot like yours." Juanita's heart raced. She remembered writing that note in June 1998, the night before what would become Michael's famous last shot game against Utah. She had arranged for the team manager to leave it in his locker before the game. The note contained information directly connected to what Michael had placed in the wooden box years earlier. It was meant to remind him in that crucial moment of what truly mattered beyond basketball. She had never known if he'd read it. After the phone call, Juanita retrieved the wooden box from her safe. Opening it for the first time in years, she examined its contents carefully. The original letter from Michael. The list titled, "What Matters Most." The second letter faxed before his final championship game. Her own unsent letter from after their divorce. And one empty space where another document should have been. Taking a deep breath, she called her attorney. "I need to be added to this court case," she said. "I have information neither side knows about." Her lawyer was confused. "This is just about some old memorabilia, Juanita. Why would you want to get involved?" "Because what they found isn't just memorabilia," she explained. "It's part of something private between Michael and me. Something that should stay private." The following week, court documents were filed adding Juanita Vanoy as an interested party in the case of Jordan versus Collectors Association of American Sports. Michael's lawyers called immediately. "What are you doing?" his chief attorney demanded. "Michael doesn't want you involved in this." "I need to speak with him directly," Juanita insisted. "That's not possible right now. He's authorized us to handle this matter." "Then tell him I have the box," she said simply. "He'll know what that means." 3 days later, Michael himself called. It was the first direct conversation they'd had in nearly 2 years. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice carrying that same intensity she remembered from years ago. "Because some things shouldn't belong to collectors or museums," she answered. "Some things should stay between us." A long silence followed. "You still have it?" Abi finally asked. "The box? Of course I do," she said. "And now they've found the missing piece." Another pause. "I'll be in Chicago next week for the court date," Michael said. "We should talk before then." "I agree," Juanita said. "There's something you need to see." After hanging up, Juanita opened the wooden box one more time. Everything it contained had shaped their past. Now, unexpectedly, it would connect them again, in the present. The court date approached. Chicago media buzzed with speculation about why Michael Jordan's ex-wife had joined a seemingly straightforward memorabilia case. Nobody knew about the wooden box or its significance. Nobody knew what Juanita planned to bring into that courtroom, or how it would change the way people saw the most famous basketball player in history. The day before the court hearing, Michael's private jet landed at Chicago O'Hare. A black SUV with tinted windows whisked him to the Four Seasons Hotel downtown. Few people recognized the basketball legend beneath the brim of his cap and behind dark sunglasses, just how he preferred it these days. In his suite, Michael paced, his mind racing. After 15 years of separation, tomorrow he would face Juanita. In court. Not over custody or money, but over something he'd almost forgotten. Something from another lifetime. His phone rang. It was his current wife, Yvette. "Are the girls in bed?" he asked, forcing brightness into his voice. "Just tucked them in," Yvette answered. "They wanted to know when Daddy's coming home." "Tell them. Soon," Michael said. "This shouldn't take long." After they hung up, Michael walked to the window. Chicago's skyline sparkled in the winter night. This city had once been his kingdom. Each glittering light seemed to hold a memory. The United Center where fans chanted his name, the restaurants where he couldn't eat in peace, the streets he'd driven after big games, sometimes with Juanita beside him. 15 miles north in Highland Park, Juanita sat in her home office, the wooden box open before her. Their old house, the massive compound where they'd raised their children, had been sold years ago. This newer, smaller home better suited her quieter life. She lifted Michael's original letter from the box, the paper now delicate with age. His handwriting brought back the young man she'd met, before championships and global fame transformed him. Her phone chimed with a text from their daughter Jasmine. "Mom, are you sure about tomorrow?" "Yes," Juanita typed back. "Some things need proper endings." Across town, in a downtown bar, sports reporters traded theories over beers. "Maybe she found evidence he was betting on games," one suggested. "Nah," said another. "It's probably just personal letters she doesn't want public." "Whatever it is," added a veteran reporter who'd covered Michael since his rookie season, "I've never seen Jordan caught off guard like this. He controls everything." Morning arrived with media trucks already parked outside the courthouse. Inside, lawyers huddled with clients. The Collectors Association representatives rehearsed arguments about historical preservation and contractual rights. At 8:30 a.m., Michael arrived through a private entrance, avoiding cameras. His legal team surrounded him like a defensive formation. At 8:45 a.m., Juanita entered through the main doors, the wooden box tucked inside her large purse. A few reporters recognized her, shouting questions she didn't answer. The bailiff directed her to a small conference room to wait. As she sat alone, the door suddenly opened. Michael stood there, hesitating at the threshold. "May I come in?" he asked formally, as if addressing a stranger. Juanita nodded. Michael closed the door behind him. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Two people who had once shared everything, now connected primarily by history, and three grown children. "You look well," Michael said finally. "So do you," she replied. Another silence stretched between them. "The box," Michael said, gesturing to her purse. "You really kept it all these years." Juanita nodded again, removing it carefully. "I promised I would. I remember." Michael's voice softened. "That night, before the Utah game, you left that note in my locker. You did read it." "Of course I did. And I kept the paper you mentioned, folded in my sock during the game." Juanita smiled slightly. "Your lucky charm." It worked, didn't it? For a brief moment, the legendary competitive gleam returned to his eyes. The conversation turned to their children, Jeffrey's coaching career, Marcus's shoe store business, Jasmine's work with the Charlotte Hornets. They spoke as two parents, proud of their children, finding common ground in shared accomplishment. "Your girls are beautiful," Juanita said, referring to his 7-year-old twins with Yvette. "Jasmine shows me photos sometimes." Michael nodded, looking momentarily uncomfortable at the mention of his second family. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, returning to the reason they were both here. "After all these years, why get involved? In a legal case about some old paper in my locker?" Juanita opened the wooden box and removed its contents one by one. The original letter. The list titled, "What Matters Most." The second letter. "Because this tells a different story about Michael Jordan than the one everyone thinks they know," she said. "And I believe some stories should remain private, even for people like you." Michael stared at the papers, transported back to his younger self, the man who'd had enough self-awareness to fear what fame might do to him. "The paper they found in your locker," Juanita continued, "contains the other half of something very personal. Something that belongs just to us and our children, not to collectors or museums." Before Michael could respond, a knock came at the door. The bailiff announced it was time to enter the courtroom. "Do you trust me to handle this?" Juanita asked, gathering the papers and returning them to the box. Michael studied her face for a long moment. Despite everything that had happened between them, despite the painful end to their marriage, he recognized the integrity that had first drawn him to her. "I do," he said simply. As they walked toward the courtroom, Michael Jordan, a man accustomed to controlling everything in his world, found himself surrendering control to the woman who knew him before he became an icon. The wooden box, carried in Juanita's hands, contained more than old papers. It held the truth about a man the world thought it knew everything about. A truth that was about to be tested in the most public of forums. The court deputy opened the heavy doors. Cameras clicked. Reporters leaned forward. The most dramatic chapter of the Michael Jordan story was about to unfold. Judge Patricia Wilson presided over a packed courtroom. Reporters filled every available seat. The case, originally a dry dispute over memorabilia ownership, had transformed into the most intriguing Michael Jordan story in years. The judge called the proceedings to order, summarizing the case. "We're here regarding ownership of items discovered during renovations at the United Center," she explained. Specifically, a document found in Michael Jordan's former locker. "We have 3 parties claiming interest: Mr. Jordan himself, the Collectors Association of American Sports, and now Ms. Juanita Vanoy, Mr. Jordan's former spouse." The Collectors Association attorney spoke first, citing contractual agreements with the Chicago Bulls organization. "These items are historical artifacts," he argued. "They belong to basketball history, not to individuals." Michael's attorney countered that anything in his client's personal locker remained his private property, regardless of where it was found. When Juanita's turn came, a hushed anticipation fell over the courtroom. She approached the witness stand, the wooden box in her hands. "Ms. Vanoy," Judge Wilson said, "please explain your interest in this matter." Juanita's voice was steady. "Your Honor, the document found in that locker is connected to private family matters. It refers directly to contents of this box, which Michael entrusted to me years ago." The judge asked to examine the box. As Juanita handed it over, Michael watched intently, his face unreadable. Judge Wilson opened it carefully, reviewing the contents. After several minutes, she looked up. "I believe a private conversation is warranted. We'll take a short recess while I speak with the parties in chambers." Away from public eyes, the judge addressed all 3 parties. "This appears to be a deeply personal matter that the court is reluctant to make public. I suggest you attempt to reach an agreement before we proceed further." 2 hours of tense negotiation followed. Eventually, all parties emerged with a settlement. The Collectors Association would receive certain items from the locker, Michael's practice jersey and shoes, but the document would remain private family property. The press was disappointed by the anticlimactic resolution. Speculation ran wild, but the true story remained hidden. Outside the courthouse, Michael and Juanita stood momentarily side by side as their respective car services arrived. "Thank you," Michael said quietly. Juanita nodded. "Some stories aren't for selling." They parted ways, the wooden box secure in Juanita's possession once again. 3 months later, on a rainy April morning in Chicago, Juanita's phone rang. The ICTU caller ID showed an unfamiliar number with a North Carolina area code. "Ms. Vanoy?" a man's voice asked when she answered. "My name is Thomas Wilson. I was a friend of James Jordan." Juanita sat down slowly. James Jordan, Michael's father, had been dead for nearly 30 years. "I'm not sure I understand," she said cautiously. "I worked with James at the textile factory back in the early days," the man explained, "before Michael made it big. James, and I stayed in touch over the years." "What is this about, Mr. Wilson?" "They're renovating the old factory where we worked. They found something in James's old locker, a letter addressed to Michael, never sent. Given what happened to James..." "Well, I thought you might know how to handle this." Juanita's heart raced. "Why call me instead of Michael directly?" The man hesitated. James once told me if anything ever happened to him, you were the one who kept Michael grounded, said you understood things about his son that nobody else did. After hanging up, Juanita sat motionless, thinking. Michael's father had been murdered in 1993, a random act of violence that changed Michael forever. A letter from beyond the grave would be no small matter. She called their daughter Jasmine. "I need your advice," Juanita said, explaining the situation. "You have to tell Dad," Jasmine replied immediately. "It's complicated," Juanita sighed. "We've barely spoken since the court case. But this is about Grandpa." Jasmine's voice softened. "Dad needs to know." Juanita knew her daughter was right. Some things transcended old hurts and separate lives. She sent Michael a text. "Need to speak with you about something important, regarding your father." His response came quickly. "Call me." When she explained about Thomas Wilson's call, Michael was silent for so long she thought the connection had dropped. "Michael? I want to go there," he finally said. "To North Carolina. To get it myself." "I understand." Another pause. "Would you come with me?" The question seemed to surprise them both. Juanita considered all the reasons to refuse. Their lives had diverged long ago. She had built something solid and independent. Reopening old connections rarely ended well, yet something about his request felt right. Perhaps because it wasn't about them, but about honoring James Jordan's wishes. "When?" she asked simply. "I'll send the jet tomorrow." The following day, Juanita found herself boarding Michael's private plane. The luxury interior reflected his enormous wealth, a stark contrast to their early days when commercial flights were a splurge. Michael greeted her formally, maintaining careful distance. They spent most of the short flight discussing their children and grandchildren, safe topics that required no emotional vulnerability. As they landed in North Carolina, Michael asked about the wooden box. "Did you bring it?" "I did," Juanita confirmed. "It seemed important." He nodded. "Whatever my father wrote, it might connect somehow." The textile factory stood on the outskirts of Wilmington, now closed and awaiting redevelopment. Thomas Wilson met them at the entrance, clearly awed to be meeting Michael Jordan despite his age. "Your father was a good man," Wilson said as he led them through the empty building. "Cicerfo, proudest father I ever knew." They reached a room of old metal lockers. Wilson pointed to one with J. Jordan faded on the front. Company policy was to clear lockers when someone left, Wilson explained. But when your father died, nobody had the heart to go through his things. Then the section closed, and eventually, everyone forgot these were even here. He handed Michael a key. "I'll give you privacy." Alone with Juanita, Michael stared at the locker. His hand trembled slightly as he inserted the key. Inside was a dusty Chicago Bulls cap, some work clothes, a lunchbox, ordinary items frozen in time, and at the back, a sealed envelope with Michael's name written in James Jordan's distinctive handwriting. Michael took it carefully, as if it might disintegrate in his hands. "Open it," Juanita encouraged softly. The letter was dated June 20th, 1993, just weeks before James was murdered. As Michael read, tears filled his eyes. After finishing, he handed it silently to Juanita. James had written about how proud he was of Michael's accomplishments, but worried about the weight of fame on his son's shoulders. He encouraged Michael to remember what basketball was before money and fame. Pure joy. He mentioned the wooden box Michael had told him about, writing, "Whatever you put in that box, son, make sure it's what you want to be remembered for when the cheering stops." Michael took the wooden box from Juanita. Together, they added James's letter to its contents. "He knew," Michael said quietly. Somehow, he knew what I would need to hear, even years later. As they left the factory, the past and present seemed momentarily aligned. Their separate lives had crossed again for this purpose, to honor the man who had shaped Michael into the person he became. "What now?" Juanita asked as they drove away. "Now we finish what my father started," Michael replied. There's something I need to do with this box." The flight back to Chicago was quiet. Michael stared out the window, lost in thought. Juanita gave him space, recognizing the familiar expression he wore when processing difficult emotions. As the plane began its descent, Michael finally spoke. "I've been thinking about the court case, about that paper they found in my locker." "The one connected to the box?" Juanita asked. Michael nodded. "It was my original Bulls contract from 1984, but not the official one. It was my personal copy, with notes I'd written in the margins," Juanita remembered. The night before his final championship game, Michael had placed that contract in his locker as a reminder of how far he'd come. She'd mentioned it in her note to him, connecting it to the contents of the wooden box. "Why would collectors want your personal contract copy?" she asked. "Because of what I wrote on it," Michael explained. "Before I signed with the Bulls, I made a promise to myself and to my father. I wrote it directly on the contract." The plane touched down. As they prepared to disembark, Michael turned to Juanita. "I need one more day before we go back to court. There's something I need to tell you first." They agreed to meet the following morning at a small coffee shop in Highland Park, a place they'd frequented in the early years of their marriage. Before Michael became too famous to sit unnoticed in public. The coffee shop had changed owners 3 times since then, but the corner booth where they'd often sat remained. Michael arrived wearing a plain baseball cap and glasses. His version of a disguise. Juanita brought the wooden box. They ordered coffee, neither touching the pastries that came with it. "I've never told anyone the full story," Michael began. "Not even you." He explained that when the Bulls first drafted him, his agent had negotiated his rookie contract, a standard deal with standard language. But Michael had felt something was missing. "I wanted to make sure basketball never became just about money," he said. "So on my personal copy, I added something." He'd written a commitment that 10% of everything he earned would go to children's charities in Chicago and North Carolina. Not as a public pledge or tax write-off, but as a private promise. "Dad was the only one who knew," Michael continued. "He helped me set up anonymous donation channels. When Nike came along with the shoe deal, the percentage grew huge. We kept it quiet because I didn't want it to become a publicity thing." Over the years, tens of millions of dollars had flowed secretly from Michael's earnings to inner-city programs, children's hospitals, and educational initiatives. After Dad died, I put my contract copy in the wooden box for safekeeping. Then, before that final game in '98, I took it back out. I wanted to remind myself why I played, not just for championships, but for what I could do beyond basketball. Juanita listened, piecing together a puzzle she'd only partially understood during their marriage. "That explains the separate accounts. The meetings with those financial advisors I never met." Michael nodded. "I should have told you, but I'd promised Dad it would stay just between us." "But why hide it?" Juanita asked. "Most people would shout their charitable giving from the rooftops." "Because of what Dad taught me," Michael said simply. "He always said true character is what you do when no one's watching." The revelation shed new light on the man she'd been married to for 17 years. Behind the ultra-competitive athlete, the commercial pitchman, the global icon, there had been this secret commitment. One he'd kept even from her. "So the paper they found in your locker, is the only written proof of the arrangement, Michael confirmed. If collectors get it, they'll publish it. The anonymity will be gone. Juanita understood now. And that matters to you, even after all these years. It does, Michael admitted. Not for my sake, but for my father's. This was something sacred between us. The wooden box sat between them on the table, its contents now holding even greater significance. There's something else, Michael continued. Something I never told anyone. He explained that after their divorce was finalized, he had added a legal provision to his will and financial structures. Juanita would always have oversight of the charitable funds, whether she knew about them or not. Why would you do that? She asked, genuinely surprised. Because you were the only person besides my father who never cared about the money or the fame, Michael said. You saw me. Just me, from the beginning. The weight of this trust hung in the air between them. Not romantic love, but something perhaps more enduring. Respect forged through decades of shared history. So tomorrow in court, Juanita began. Tomorrow, I need your help, Michael said. The collectors can't get that contract. Not because it's valuable to me, but because making it public would change something that should remain private. Juanita considered this. What do you want me to do? Bring the box, Michael said. Show the judge what it contains. Help me explain why this isn't just about memorabilia. It's about honoring my father's memory and protecting something that was never meant for public consumption. For years after their divorce, Juanita had worked to define herself separately from being Michael Jordan's ex-wife. She'd built a life independent of his shadow. Stepping back into that connection, even briefly, felt complicated. And yet, this wasn't about their failed marriage. It was about something larger, a promise that extended beyond their relationship to touch countless lives through Michael's secret generosity. I'll do it, she said finally. Not for you or me, but for your father, and for the children who benefit from what you've done. Relief crossed Michael's face. Thank you. As they prepared to leave, Michael hesitated. There's one more thing. I want to add to the box. He removed a small envelope from his jacket and placed it inside. For my children and grandchildren, so they'll understand someday. Juanita nodded, accepting this new addition to their shared history. Outside the coffee shop, they paused awkwardly. Two people who had once shared everything, now uncertain how to say goodbye. Tomorrow, then, Michael said. Tomorrow, Juanita agreed, the wooden box secure in her hands. As they walked to their separate cars, passers-by saw only a tall man in a baseball cap and an elegant woman carrying a wooden box. No one recognized that they had just witnessed a private moment between two people whose public story was only one small part of a much larger truth. The next morning would bring them back to the courtroom where the most surprising chapter of the Michael Jordan story would finally be revealed. The morning of the hearing dawned clear and cold. News vans lined the street outside the courthouse, reporters stamping their feet against the chill. The unexpected drama surrounding Michael Jordan, a man who had largely receded from public view in recent years, created a media frenzy. Inside, the court officer directed Michael and Juanita to separate waiting areas. Michael's legal team huddled around him, reviewing strategy in hushed tones. In a smaller room, Juanita sat alone with the wooden box on her lap, gathering her thoughts. At precisely 9:01 a.m., Judge Patricia Wilson entered courtroom 3B. "Rise," called the bailiff as the proceedings began. "Before we continue with testimony," the judge announced, "I understand the parties have had further discussions. Is there any change to your positions? The Collectors Association attorney stood first. Your Honor, our position remains unchanged. The items found during renovation belong to basketball history and should be preserved for public appreciation. Michael's attorney followed. Your Honor, we maintain that personal items from Mr. Jordan's locker remain his private property. Finally, Juanita's lawyer rose. Your Honor, Ms. Vanoy is prepared to testify regarding the personal and family significance of the items in question. Judge Wilson nodded. Very well. Let's proceed with testimony. She turned to Michael's attorney. Call your first witness. The defense calls Michael Jordan. A murmur swept through the courtroom as Michael rose and approached the witness stand. Even after all these years, his presence commanded attention. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and took his seat. His attorney began with basic questions establishing Michael's career with the Chicago Bulls and his use of the locker where the document was found. Then he turned to the heart of the matter. Mr. Jordan, can you explain the significance of the document found in your former locker? Michael leaned toward the microphone. It's my personal copy of my first Bulls contract from 1984. It contains private notes I wrote that were never intended for public viewing. And why is keeping this document private important to you? Michael paused, choosing his words carefully. Those notes represent a personal commitment I made to my father when I was just starting my career. Sharing them publicly would change the nature of that commitment. The Collectors Association attorney cross-examined Michael aggressively, suggesting the document was simply a historical artifact that belonged to basketball history. Mr. Jordan, he pressed, wouldn't basketball fans and historians benefit from seeing your early thoughts as you began your legendary career? Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. Not everything about my life belongs to fans or historians. Some things were meant to stay private. Next, the Collectors Association called an expert witness, a sports memorabilia appraiser, who testified that the contract could be worth millions at auction. Items of this significance rarely appear on the market, the appraiser explained. A personal contract with Mr. Jordan's handwritten notes would be extraordinarily valuable. Throughout this testimony, Michael remained stoic, though those who knew him well could see tension in the set of his jaw. When it was Juanita's turn to testify, she approached the stand carrying the wooden box. After being sworn in, she placed it on the small ledge before her. Ms. Vanoy, her attorney began, please explain your connection to this case. Juanita spoke clearly and directly. The document found in Michael's locker is part of a collection of personal papers that we've preserved for many years, first during our marriage and then separately after our divorce. What is the significance of that wooden box you've brought today? This box contains letters and documents that Michael entrusted to me early in our relationship, she explained. They represent promises he made to himself, to his father, and to causes he believed in privately. The contract found in his locker belongs with these items. The Collectors Association attorney approached for cross-examination. Ms. Vanoy, you've been divorced from Mr. Jordan for over 15 years. Why would you continue to care about his personal papers? A slight murmur of disapproval rippled through the courtroom at the aggressive tone. Juanita remained poised. Our marriage ended, but our respect for each other's privacy did not. Some commitments transcend personal relationships. Isn't it true that making these documents public would simply complete the historical record of Michael Jordan's career? Don't fans deserve the full story? Juanita looked directly at the attorney. No one is entitled to every detail of another person's life, not even someone famous. Michael's public career and his private promises are separate matters. As the testimony continued, Judge Wilson asked to examine the contents of the wooden box. Court was briefly recessed while she reviewed the materials in her chambers, with attorneys from all parties present. When proceedings resumed, the judge seemed more thoughtful, even somber. Having reviewed these materials, she announced, "I better understand the personal nature of this case. Let me be clear. Celebrity does not negate privacy. Even public figures maintain the right to keep certain aspects of their lives private." She turned to the Collectors Association attorney. "Your client's interest appears primarily financial rather than historical. The court is not persuaded that public interest outweighs Mr. Jordan's right to privacy in this instance." Then she addressed Michael directly. "Mr. Jordan, while the court recognizes your right to these personal documents, I would encourage you to consider what elements of your story might properly belong to history." Finally, she turned to Juanita. "Ms. Vinoy, your testimony speaks to the importance of honoring commitments beyond formal legal obligations. The court appreciates your perspective." Judge Wilson delivered her ruling. The document found in Michael's Tampituentois locker would be returned to him as personal property. However, the Chicago Bulls organization would maintain rights to other items found during renovation that did not contain personal writings or commitments. As the judge concluded the proceedings, reporters rushed from the courtroom to file their stories. The case that had promised drama had delivered something unexpected: a glimpse into the private values of a public icon. Michael and Juanita exited through separate doors, avoiding the media crush outside. The wooden box remained with Juanita, its contents once again secure from public scrutiny. Later that afternoon, Michael's driver delivered a handwritten note to Juanita's home. It contained just 4 words: "Thank you for understanding." The message referred not just to her testimony, but to decades of keeping faith with the contents of the wooden box, the promises and commitments that had shaped Michael Jordan beyond the basketball court. That evening, as news reports speculated about what might have been in the mysterious contract, Juanita placed the wooden box back in her safe. Whatever Michael had written on that rookie contract would remain private, not because courts had ordered it, but because some promises deserved to be honored in silence. Tomorrow, their lives would return to their separate orbits. But for one day, Michael and Juanita had stood together to protect something that mattered to both of them. A rare moment of unity that spoke to connections deeper than marriage certificates or divorce decrees. 3 days after the court hearing, Michael Jordan surprised Juanita with an invitation. His personal assistant called to ask if she would meet him at the United Center that evening, after hours, when the building would be empty. Juanita hesitated before agreeing. Her testimony had concluded their legal matter, but something in Michael's message suggested unfinished business. That night, she drove herself to the arena, the wooden box beside her on the passenger seat. Security guards expecting her arrival escorted her through quiet hallways to the basketball court itself. Michael stood at center court, hands in his pockets, looking up at the championship banners and his retired number 23 hanging from the rafters. He turned when he heard her footsteps echo across the hardwood. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice carrying in the empty arena. Juanita nodded, the wooden box in her hands. "Your message said it was important." Michael gestured to 2 chairs set up at center court. "I wanted to finish what we started, away from lawyers and judges and reporters." They sat facing each other where the Bulls logo sprawled across the floor, the same fierce bull that had emblazoned Michael's chest during his playing days. "I've been thinking about that contract," Michael began, "about what I wrote on it all those years ago." He explained that his handwritten note wasn't just about charitable donations. It included a personal mission statement, promises to himself about the kind of player and person he wanted to be. "I wrote that I would never let money change who I was," he said quietly. that I would remember where I came from. That family would always come first. Michael looked down at his hands. I broke those promises, Juanita. The fame, the money, the pressure. They changed me. Basketball became everything. The honesty in his voice took Juanita back to earlier, days before championships and global fame had created barriers between them. We all change, Michael, she said. That's part of growing up. He shook his head. It's more than that. I lost sight of what mattered most. The night before that last championship game, when I wrote that note and put my contract in the locker, I was trying to remind myself of the person I wanted to be after basketball. And who was that? Juanita asked. Someone my father would recognize, Michael answered simply. Someone who used his success to help others quietly, not for publicity. Someone who put family first. Juanita opened the wooden box and removed its contents one by one, laying them on a small table between the chairs. The original letter from young Michael. The list titled, What Matters Most. The faxed note before his final game. James Jordan's recently discovered letter. Michael's latest edition. The sealed envelope for their children. May I? Michael asked, gesturing to his father's letter. Juanita handed it to him. As Michael read the words again, emotion crossed his face. My father knew, he said, looking up. He knew the fame was changing me. He tried to warn me before he died. The weight of this realization hung in the air between them. All these years later, James Jordan's wisdom still had the power to reach his son. Michael carefully returned the letter to the box. There's something I want to add today. From his pocket, he withdrew a folded document, the original contract that had been found in his locker, and returned to him by court order. This belongs with the rest, he said, placing it in the box. But first, I want you to read what I wrote on it. Juanita unfolded the yellowed paper carefully. In the margins of the standard NBA contract, 21-year-old Michael had written, I promise to honor my father's name by remembering that basketball is a gift, not a right. 10% of everything I earn will help children who need it, without publicity. Success will mean nothing if I forget where I came from. When basketball ends, family will remain. Tears filled Juanita's eyes as she read the words written in a much younger Michael's hand, promises made before anyone could have imagined the fame and fortune that awaited him. All these years, she said softly, you've been keeping this promise. Michael nodded. The charitable foundation everyone knows about is separate. This was always private, just like my father wanted. And you made me the trustee after our divorce, Juanita added, understanding now the full significance of that decision. Because you were the only one who knew the real me, Michael said. Not the basketball player or the businessman. Just me. In that moment, the years between them seemed to compress, not erasing the pain or mistakes, but placing them in a larger context of shared history and mutual understanding. I wanted you to know why this mattered so much, Michael continued. Why I couldn't let collectors or museums have that contract. It wasn't about money or privacy. It was about honoring a promise. Juanita carefully returned the contract to the wooden box, placing it alongside the other documents that charted Michael Jordan's private journey. What happens now? She asked. Now we make sure the children understand someday, Michael replied. Not just ours, but my daughter's with Yvette, too. I want them to know about the promises, about their grandfather's wisdom, about the parts of me that weren't for public consumption. He gestured to the box. This has always been safe with you. I'd like it to stay that way. Juanita nodded, accepting this continued connection between them. not as husband and wife, but as keepers of a shared legacy. As they prepared to leave the empty arena, Michael looked around one last time at the championship banners, the retired jersey, the scene of his greatest professional triumphs. "You know what's strange?" he said. "None of this matters as much as what's in that box." Juanita understood. For all his athletic greatness, the true measure of Michael Jordan might be found in private promises, kept away from cameras and crowds. Commitments honored not for public praise, but because they were the right thing to do. They walked together toward the exit, their footsteps echoing on the hardwood court. Outside, their lives would continue on separate paths. But they would remain connected by the wooden box and its contents. Tangible reminders of the man behind the legend, the promises that shaped him, and the private integrity that had survived. Despite the distorting pressures of fame, the most surprising chapter of the Michael Jordan story would remain largely untold. And that, perhaps, was exactly as it should be. The story should have ended there, with the wooden box safely back in Juanita's possession and the court case settled. But life rarely provides such tidy conclusions. 2 weeks after their meeting, at the United Center, Juanita received an unexpected call from Jeffrey, their oldest son. "Mom, have you seen the news?" His voice sounded urgent. "What news?" she asked, immediately concerned. "Someone leaked details about Dad's contract. It's all over the sports networks." Juanita turned on the television to see commentators discussing Michael Jordan's secret philanthropy. Somehow, information about the handwritten notes on his rookie contract had reached the media. Her phone rang again almost immediately. This time, it was Michael. "It wasn't me," she said, before he could speak. "I know," he replied, his voice uncharacteristically tired. "My lawyer thinks it was someone from the court, a clerk who made copies of the evidence." The story spread rapidly. Sports channels ran special features about the hidden side of Michael Jordan. Newspapers printed excerpts supposedly from the contract notes. Most got the details wrong, turning Michael's private commitment into something far more calculated and public than it had ever been. That afternoon, Michael called a press conference. He arrived alone, without his usual entourage of lawyers and advisors. The room fell silent as he approached the microphone. "I've spent my life in the public eye," he began, "but there are parts of my story that were never meant to be shared. Yesterday, private information about charitable work I've done was leaked to the media. I'm here to set the record straight." Michael spoke briefly about the commitment he'd made at the beginning of his career and how his father had helped him establish anonymous channels for helping children in Chicago and North Carolina. "This was never about publicity or tax benefits," he explained. "It was about honoring values my parents taught me, values that remind me where I came from." A reporter called out, "Why keep it secret, Michael? Wouldn't your example inspire others?" Michael's expression hardened slightly. "True charity doesn't need an audience. My father taught me that character is what you do when no one's watching. For 35 years, no one was watching. And that's how it should have remained." He declined to take questions, ending with a "ah-hi-de-dooey" simple statement. "Some stories aren't meant for public consumption. Even mine." Later that evening, Michael's car pulled into Juanita's driveway. She met him at the door, the wooden box in her hands. "I figured you'd come," she said. Michael nodded, following her inside. "I wanted to make sure you were okay. The media will probably try to contact you next." "I can handle reporters," Juanita assured him. "I had practice during our marriage." They sat in her living room, the wooden box between them on the coffee table. For a moment, neither spoke. "It's strange," Michael finally said. I spent my whole career wanting the world's attention. Now I just want privacy." "Some things change," Juanita replied. "Some don't." Michael looked at her questioningly. "You still keep your promises," she explained. "All these years later, that hasn't changed." He smiled slightly at that. "I try." Juanita opened the wooden box and removed James Jordan's letter. "Your father would be proud of that, not the championships or the business empire. Just the fact that you kept your word." Michael nodded, emotion flickering across his face. "That means more than the other stuff now." As evening turned to night, they talked about their children, their grandchildren, the future. Not as a couple, reunited, but as two people who had witnessed each other's highest and lowest moments, who knew each other in ways no one else could. When Michael finally rose to leave, Juanita handed him the wooden box. "Take this with you. Show your daughters. When they're older, they should know this part of their father." Michael looked surprised. "You've kept it safe all these years." "And now it's your turn," she said simply. Some stories need to be told directly, not inherited. Standing at the door, Michael turned to face her one last time. "Thank you," he said, "for keeping faith with who I wanted to be, even when I lost sight of it myself." Juanita nodded, understanding the weight of his words. Their marriage had ended, but some connections remained unbroken. Stronger, perhaps, for having weathered the storms that tore others apart. As Michael's car disappeared down the street, the wooden box resting on the seat beside him, Juanita felt a sense of completion. The most surprising chapter of the Michael Jordan story would continue, not in courtrooms or press conferences, but in quiet moments between a father and his children, in promises kept out of the spotlight, in a legacy built on more than just athletic greatness. Some truths are most powerful when whispered, not shouted. And sometimes, the most important victories happen far from any crowd. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to know which part of the world you connected with this emotional journey of basketball's greatest legend and the woman who protected his most treasured memories. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories that reveal the human side of your favorite celebrities and sports legends. Share this video with your friends and family who appreciate meaningful stories about integrity, promises kept in silence, and the true measure of a person's character beyond the spotlight. Together, we can spread kindness and awareness that sometimes the most important chapters of our lives are the ones that remain largely untold. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.